Hello, everyone. I would like to thank you for joining today's webinar on a very important and pressing topic that affects us all, our corporate and potential personal criminal liability for selling unsafe food. Food Industry Council is proud to be sponsoring this free webinar, and our speaker today is Sean Stevens. Sean is a global food safety lawyer and founding member of Food Industry Council, LLC, the only law firm in the world that represents the food industry exclusively. Mr. Stevens works throughout the country and abroad with food industry clients, including some of the world's largest food processors, national restaurant chains and food distributors, and grocers, helping them protect their brand by eliminating their food safety risks, complying with FDA and USDA food safety regulations, managing recalls, and defending high-profile foodborne illness claims. Mr. Stevens also speaks regularly to national and international audiences on a wide variety of emerging scientific, regulatory, and legal food safety trends, authors dedicated columns for Meeting Place and the National Provisioner, and is quoted regularly by national media publications such as Time Magazine, the New York Post, and Corporate Counsel Magazine. Additional information about Mr. Stevens' food safety and food quality legal practice can be found at foodindustrycouncil.com. Please note that there will be an opportunity during and throughout the webinar to type and send us your questions. In the event we cannot get to all the questions presented, please feel free to email Sean directly, and he will make sure that any questions that you may have are answered. Thank you again for attending, and I would like to now hand it over to Sean.
Thank you for that introduction. I want to thank everybody who joined us today and is participating in this webinar focused on an extremely important topic. We're witnessing some very incredible and substantial changes in the food industry that affect all of us, not only our corporations, our products, and our brand, but potentially us personally. And there's been a shift in the policy being adopted and followed by FDA and DOJ and others as it relates to food regulation and the liabilities and exposures that we face when we have food safety failures. And I'm happy to provide some information and some insight, maybe even a little bit of inside baseball today as we talk about how we've gotten over the last couple of years to where we are today with respect to the risks that we now face from a criminal standpoint, what is happening currently as it relates to certain food companies that are under active investigation, and what we predict will be happening in the future, in the coming weeks, months, and years as this policy and aggressive enforcement by the government regulators continues to unfold. And then, of course, most important, what we can be doing within our own organizations starting today to better protect ourselves from sort of the new threats and the new exposures that exist and impact our industry and our professions. So, you know, every year, and these numbers are increasing, but we're at a point where we're seeing somewhere in the ballpark of about 500 food product recalls every year, and that involves recalls that are both on the USDA regulated side and also the FDA regulated side. That's a tremendous amount of food products, and in part it's because our surveillance has gotten so good, our ability to detect contamination in foods and also our ability to detect illnesses that are resulting from those foods. And I often ask you know, my colleagues in events such as this or when I speak, you know, if we had to rank our risk from high to low that our food products this year are going to be recalled for any particular problem, where would we rank ourselves? Would it be very high or would it be very low? And I think the vast majority of us would say, well, you know, we get it, we understand there's a risk, but we think that risk is relatively small. But, you know, I want to just point out a couple of examples when we talk about the types of risk and exposure that we have. And the different companies that are facing not only civil exposure, which is what we used to talk about, what is our civil exposure for producing unsafe products? What is it going to cost if Bill Marler sues our company because we made somebody sick? But also now, more often, we're speaking about the regulatory exposure. So, you know, what is it going to mean to my company if I'm involved in an outbreak or a recall? And what is going to happen vis-a-vis FDA and the regulatory scrutiny that I'm going to face as a result? But increasingly, now also this thing here, our criminal exposure for producing unsafe foods. And to call out a couple of examples where now all three of these are being implicated you know, and trying to help us answer what is our risk profile as an individual and a corporation. Is it high or is it low? You know, we can just point to a couple examples recently. The caramel apple outbreak associated with Listeria monocytogenes that made a number of people sick, and there were some deaths associated with that. And I can guarantee you, if I would have asked 2 years ago, the executives and CEOs of the caramel apple, in the caramel apple industry, where their risk was it high or low that their products would be associated with the outbreak, they would have told me exceedingly low. And then the next one in line, Blue Bell ice cream. We're all familiar with Blue Bell and what happened there. If I had the opportunity to have the CEO on a webinar like this, and I would have said, hey, what's the risk that your ice cream will be associated with an outbreak that lasted 5 years and got nearly a dozen people sick, they would have laughed and said 0, right, or extremely low. We understand it's possible, but it's never going to happen to us. Or how about Chipotle, if that question had been asked? What would the answer have been? Or perhaps Dole, more recently, with its packaged salads, CRF Frozen Foods, with the outbreak associated with frozen vegetables spanning a long period of time. Or more recently, the outbreak associated with flour, E. coli contamination in flour associated with products supplied by General Mills. And, you know, I can guarantee you that all of the people involved in these organizations would have said, you know, we've got it under control. We think our risk is pretty low. And I make this point because as each of us involved in this industry, it's critically important that we realize that regardless of the food products that we're supplying, whether it's caramel apple salads or flour or anything in between, our risk is the box we should be checking really should be the one that says high. Now, why should we care? Why should we care about the potential of, you know, our products becoming contaminated with a pathogen of concern and then being distributed out into commerce? First of all, you know, our customers can sue our company, and this falls under the category of civil that we saw just a moment ago. The civil exposure that we face, right? Our customers, if they're consumers, they can sue us for damages as a result of the illnesses that they suffered. If there are corporate customers, you know, we're supplying ingredients to another company that turns it into a food product, or a company that puts it on its shelves, or a company that serves it to its customers as they come in at retail, we can be sued as a result of the damages that consumers or our customers suffer, and that can be very, very, very costly. But we should also care, right, because the FDA and the USDA can shut us down. They can shut down our facility, and that falls under the regulatory category, right, that we talked about. Increasing regulatory scrutiny, increasing regulatory exposure, and can be very, very distracting when bad things happen. But what we want to focus on today, and really what we want to talk about and put into context, is this, that DOJ, in cooperation with FDA, can put us in jail, or they can bring criminal charges against our company generally, or in some cases, they can bring criminal charges against us individually for our acts or omissions, the things that we do, or, put another way, the things that we fail to do. So I'm going to take a step back before we kind of roll into, you know, what is our real exposure from a criminal standpoint as it relates to what FDA is now doing. And to sort of set the table, right, I want to talk a little bit about this, PulseNet. And the vast majority of large numbers of people who have gotten sick as a result of eating contaminated food that are in the PulseNet database, but the vast majority of which were those illnesses or outbreaks they remain unsolved. They're cold cases. The vast majority of people in the PulseNet database have gotten sick from food products that we have not figured out. We haven't identified it. We haven't made an association yet between those cases and a particular food product that made them sick. And FDA, we're going to get into detail on this, but FDA is actively going out and trying to solve those cold cases, in addition to, which should cause us concern, but in addition to preventing additional cases from appearing in the future. So when we look at PulseNet, what does it tell us? What is the message? And the message is this. Since Jack in the Box, we realized we need a system in place in this country so we can track and solve foodborne illness, or at least track out foodborne illness outbreaks real time as they were occurring. So now we live under a system in which, and for about the last 15 or so years, under a system of mandatory reporting. So if anybody anywhere in the country gets sick from E. coli, Salmonella, Listeria monocytogenes, and they're cultured positive by their healthcare provider, that healthcare provider is required by law to inform the state and provide a copy of that isolate to the state. And then the states will perform pulse field gel electrophoresis, MLVA testing, now the use of whole genome sequencing, we're all hearing about that, really to identify the genetic strain of the bug, the cell, the pathogen that is getting the person sick. And that DNA strain is then uploaded to the PulseNet database. And as those strains are uploaded, they're matched. And when we see a cluster or an outbreak occurring, right, we can make the assumption that those cases are all becoming sick from a common source. We go back, we interview those case patients, we find out the history of their exposure, and we're able to identify a common source, okay? But what do we know? You know, we are able to solve many outbreaks, PCA, you know, leafy greens, cookie dough a number of years ago, some of these sort of obscure outbreaks that were occurring, and a whole bunch of them in between, like Listeria and associated with cantaloupe and others. But again, the vast majority of cases out there are sort of background noise, or it's just white static, or we see a little bump, but it's never enough, that spike in the epidemiological curves, to tell us, bam, we've got something that big is happening right now. Rather, it's just sort of the background noise. So the vast majority of cases out there, you know, they got sick from eating foods that you know, haven't been identified. And what that means is there's a lot of food companies out there, and have been for the last 15 years, that very slowly, very intermittently, at low levels, have been pushing out food or producing and selling food that was getting people sick. And again, not you know, a huge spike of contamination that's big enough for us to catch, but at low levels, where maybe Listeria within the facility is slowly at times creeping into food products, and then it's okay for a while, but then it kind of appears again, and it's in and out, right? And that's what we're looking at here when we see and look at the PulseNet database. So a lot of food companies and food products out there that have been over the last 15 to 20 years and remain making people sick, right? So lots of processors and food companies say, again, low levels, but sending out products that are causing illness. And what is the significance for us? Well, it's the announcement by FDA, right, that it is going to do something about it. It's going to use its powers and its authority and its tools, some of which are very new, and depending on your position in the industry, somewhat frightening, to wage a war on pathogens and make foodborne illness stop. Now, if you're interested, I did author a white paper on this subject, FDA's war on pathogens, criminal charges for food company executives and quality assurance managers. There's been a few developments since I wrote this white paper earlier this year, some of which we're going to talk about today, but it outlines sort of the background and the basis and summarizes what I'm talking about here during today's presentation. So feel free, if you're interested, it's an interesting read. Just type in FDA's war on pathogens, and it'll be top ranked on Google. You can go ahead and print it off and use it as a resource. So what does that mean, the war on pathogens? Well, what it means is the FDA has shifted its thinking. It has shifted its policy from, you know, a few years ago. We all know that there has been a recognition that, you know what, sometimes contamination gets into our products. You know, and we always have used the term, despite best efforts. Despite our best efforts, there's a possibility that our, contamination got into our products and we have to issue a recall. Or there's an outbreak, and as a result, people get sick, and we have to recall those products. And the regulators kind of had that same thing. Yeah, it's just there's a recognition that it's not good, it's bad, but it's going to happen, right? And when it did happen, everybody kind of looked around and said, gosh, we have to deal with the civil exposure, a little bit of regulatory exposure. FDA is going to come in, it's going to do an inspection. We're going to get a 483, which is going to turn into a warning letter. We're going to do the regulatory ballet, some negotiating back and forth. Okay, we're going to tweak this, we're going to change this, we're going to add this, and eventually the agency would be satisfied. Everybody would kind of nod their heads and say, okay, business as usual. And that was the way we thought. And the agency has just done a 180 on industry, and it has said and adopted a policy. I recently, I was on a panel at the Food Safety Summit. It's the last session of the day, and my co-panelist was Jeffrey Steger with DOJ. He heads up, he's DOJ leadership in charge of these initiatives, and he acknowledged, yeah, that's right, this is it. There is a shift, there is a new policy, and now DOJ in partnership with FDA will initiate a criminal investigation against a company if their products are associated with an outbreak or a cluster of illnesses. So if you're taking notes today, the most important note you can take, or one of the most important notes you can take, is this new human illness standard. If our food products that we sell or serve make somebody sick, or I would say cause an outbreak or a cluster of illnesses, we will be rewarded with the initiation of a criminal investigation. Now, that doesn't mean criminal charges will be brought, but we will be subject to a criminal investigation under the new human illness standard. So what does that mean? Okay, well, this is the second most important note I want you to take is this, is they're coming. And I'd ask for a show of hands if I could see them, how many people here have seen the movie Poltergeist? And the little girl is, and most of us, of course, would raise our hand, or the little girl is, it's got her hands on the TV screen, and we hear whispering and some chatter, and behind the walls, and there's some movement and scratching, and we can't really see it. We don't really know what's there, but we know it's bad, and we know it's coming our way, right? And eventually, it will be here. It will be in our living rooms, or put maybe more appropriately within our food facilities. And that's how I want you to think about the FDA and what we're going to see over the course of the next coming months and years is the FDA is coming, and it's waging this war on pathogens. And I can promise you when they get here, unless we take some steps in advance to protect ourselves, it's not going to be pleasant when they ultimately arrive. So how does that translate or intersect with this concept of FDA criminal liability? So I want to talk a little bit about what is our risk of criminal exposure, okay, as an individual and as a company. And you'd be kind of shocked to hear, how significant now in this new day and age it is. Number one. Number two, why is there a risk of criminal exposure? What is driving this? Number three, what's happened to other companies? We're going to talk a little bit about PCA, but PCA is sort of an anomaly because it was all intentional. I want to talk about the criminal investigations that are being waged against companies for selling food that they didn't know was contaminated, didn't know they were making people sick. So what's FDA doing to other companies? And then what can we do ourselves to ultimately prevent it from happening to us? What can we do to better protect ourselves? And to start the conversation, I'll ask the same question that I asked up front. What do you, again, we see sort of a show of hands. What do you think, if I were to ask you what your risk of criminal liability or exposure is? Is it high? Is it medium? Or is it low? And the answer, unfortunately, is exactly the same as the conclusion we reached with the first slide that I showed you. It's high. Currently, Bright Art Brothers, who supplied apples to the caramel apple manufacturers, is subject to DOJ criminal investigation. Currently, Bluebell is the subject of a criminal investigation. It didn't know it was selling ice cream that made 10 people sick over the course of the last 5 years. We'll talk about the details of what happened, but under criminal investigation. Chipotle, sophisticated company, didn't know that it was making people sick, or its products may have been making people sick, but nonetheless, it's the subject of an ongoing criminal investigation. More recently, Dole with the packaged salads under criminal investigation. I think we'll see the same thing. It hasn't happened yet, but with CRF Frozen Foods and then also even General Mills. Doesn't mean that those companies did anything wrong. What it means is that an investigation has been launched because their products cause human illness. So here too, we need to check the box as high and understand and realize that in this new day and age, our risk or the risk that our products may be, have low levels of contamination that's intermittent and may on occasion sneak out of our facilities, and thus thereafter be associated with a recall is pretty high. And when that happens, if there's human illnesses involved, I guarantee you our organizations will be subject to some type of criminal probe by the federal regulators. And again, that's a much different world than we operated within only a few years ago. And when we look at the question of what, there's some, in addition to just what we see happening, right, the headlines in the news, there's some other sort of quieter indications, things that are happening out on the ground that, maybe aren't necessarily being widely reported, but we see, and we're watching it unfold in front of us. The first is this concept of inspectors versus investigators. I moderate a lot of panels with FDA leadership and do a lot of presentations with FDA leadership, and I'm always intrigued at, just listening to the agency speak. And it's swapped out within just the last 18 months or so, the word that we always used to be the subject of a FDA inspection, and we had FDA inspectors that would show up and, write down their observations, and then maybe we got a 43, and that would be the end of it. Every few years we'd have an inspection. And now the agency speak is, as we ramp up FSMA and we're going out and spreading out, across the, to do our enforcement, we're hiring more investigators. We're training investigators. We're ramping up and getting our investigators ready. So they're not inspectors anymore, at least not within the agency as you listen to them speak. And I'll tell you what, there's a huge difference between an inspection and an investigation. An investigation presumes right out of the gate that something is amiss, something is wrong. And just imagine the folks who are being sent out by FDA. If I'm being told I have to go perform an inspection, my think is, okay, I just have to go see if, what I see. And I haven't made any conclusions. But if I'm told I have to conduct an investigation, well, that's something much different. So I think this, it tells us, how the agency is wired, but it also gives us a sense as to what we're going to meet when those, what once were inspectors and are now investigators, show up within our facility. The next is microbiological profiling by the agency. I want to talk in detail about huge risk here. And we really need to listen closely about what's happening and what it means to us and could mean to our companies. The correlation and, I guess, intersection with profiling in the PulseNet database, all of these cold cases that haven't been solved, and FDA is now trying to solve them, what that means for us. And then the use of federal grand jury subpoenas to gain information from food companies in the event that food products are associated with illness. So why is there this risk? Why, Sean, are we talking about this huge, massive shift in policy in the way that the FDA is responding to these issues? Well, it's really driven by, at the end of the day, the Food Safety Modernization Act. Now, a lot of folks, probably most lawyers, would get on the phone and webinar like this and say, let me talk about FSMA, and let's talk about what the regulations say, and the preamble, and I'd read it to you, and you'd see it on the screen, and kind of, okay, I get it, there's new regulations, and we want, written food safety plans, and blah, blah, blah. And I take all that and I just wipe it off the table. What is FSMA? Yeah, it's a group of, laws and regulations and, that we have to, I guess, read, interpret, and follow. But from a political standpoint, it's the FDA being told rather forcefully by Congress and the administration that you will overhaul the safety of the food supply. You will make outbreaks stop, and you will make human illness stop. That's what FSMA is. And it doesn't have to be complicated, and it doesn't have to be complex. It's the FDA being told, make foodborne illness stop, period, okay? So what does the agency do? Well, the agency says, darn it, we only, we get it, we got to make food safe, we got to make illness stop, but we only have so much money. We only have so much funding. It's going to take us 4 or 5 years just to write the regulations, just to write them down. And then how in the world are we going to go out and make sure that companies are actually following them without enough inspectors. They call them investigators, and there's no way. And we saw in the meat industry, we threw HACCP at the meat industry in the late 1990s, and it kind of stuck, but it took 10, 11, 12 years before in the meat industry, HACCP became effective in driving down the numbers of O15787 and non-O157 FTEC outbreaks associated with beef products. A good almost 15 years. And the agency's smart. It knows that just by putting regulations in place and saying, we're going to go out and enforce them with not enough people and, hope that the outbreaks stop, it's never going to happen. 15 years from now, maybe, 10 years from now, maybe, but it's not going to happen quickly. So then the agency's stuck with this problem. We've been told 5 years ago to make food safer, but, we keep hearing about more and more outbreaks. Their surveillance is getting so much better, and the RFR is so effective. And we can't have a situation where we're told make outbreaks stop, but then on the other hand, we just keep hearing about them because every time it's on the news, it stings. And then people, are questioned, it's uncomfortable, and they lose their jobs. So from a political standpoint, the agency is motivated to find some kind of tool, some kind of way that it can get to food safety faster, that they can force food safety, force a difference, but at the same time protect itself in the event that there's any issues. So what did the FDA do? Well, maybe some would argue in a stroke of Machiavellian brilliance, it said to itself, rather than, and we're still going to do it, relying on that regulation, the sanitary, transportation rule or preventive control rule to make food more safe overnight, we're gonna use this threat of criminal charges and sanctions against food companies if they make people sick. That'll get people's attention. That'll get the attention of CEOs. That'll get the food safety managers' attention, and they're going to start doing things, right, differently to ensure that they're not the next that's being publicized, and right there, the media. And if an outbreak does occur and the agency swoops down on that company and conducts a criminal investigation, what's the message to the media? At one time it may have been, FDA, what are you doing? Why are all these outbreaks happening under your watch? Now they can switch the conversation and the dialogue and say, that company was bad. Or at least the initiation of an investigation against the company suggests that it was the company's fault, the company was bad, and the company failed to protect consumers, and FDA is now going after them. So you see how that works to the agency's advantage, how this new policy enables it to accomplish the goal of appearing to make food more safe, right? And also appearing to be executing that charge in an environment where it has limited resources, limited people. So why else? Now, I guess that answers the political question, why the shift in policy. But from our standpoint, why is there risk to us as a company? And there's really two elements. The first element we already talked about is PulseNet. Our ability to see people getting sick now on a real-time basis is really, really good. It's only getting better. So if our products are making somebody sick, there's a good chance that it's going to be picked up now on the PulseNet database. Number one. Number two, with the reportable food registry, we all know that if we find, we source incoming ingredients, we test them, they're positive for a pathogen, or we ship products out, they're already downrange, they're out of our control, they're on store shelves, and we find out, maybe we test and we didn't hold for some reason. Not smart, but we did it, and we're aware of contamination, we got to let the FDA know, and they're going to investigate, and they're going to chase down every single company that might be implicated, both on the customer side, but also the supply side. So it's like 1,000 spotlights crisscrossing the skies, right, looking for problems in our products. And if there's problems in our products, there's a good chance you're going to be found, okay? But what about those sporadic, intermittent, low-level cases where, we ship some product in July that may have been contaminated and we're cool the rest of the year, right? How is anybody going to see that, especially if the levels of contamination were seemingly low? Well, that's where our exposure as an industry, and if there's a third place where you should be taking notes, it's right here. The FDA's attempt to solve all the cold cases that exist in the PulseNet database, and at the same time, its efforts to corollary effect is to prevent those additional cases from occurring in the future. So what is the agency doing? The agency is actively going out, and so are state health departments, and pulling retail samples from retail shelves of food products. Might be ice cream, could be pet food, could be deli products, the list that goes on and on. I guarantee you it'll be a lot more flour, there'll be a lot more frozen vegetables moving forward, right, because of the recent events that we've seen. And, you know, continually moving forward, we're going to see more and more food products being tested as the agency goes out and tries to actively find contamination in the marketplace. And what happens if it, say, it pulls a sample of ice cream and tests positive for Listeria monocytogenes? What's the agency going to do with that? And swap out your product for ice cream. Now, what happens if it pulls your product off retail and tests positive? It's going to look for the genetic strain of the bug in that product. And it's going to get that DNR signature, and it's going to compare it against what? Almost 20 years of illnesses in the PulseNet database. And if it finds that that organism that was cultured from your facility, or I'm sorry, in that product, matches one of those illnesses, the agency will presume that it was your products that caused that illness. And if it was, you know, depending on when it was, will expect you to issue what could potentially be an extremely broad recall. Number one. Number two, if that strain, again, was associated with human illness, guess what else you get to face? In addition to the regulatory scrutiny and the regulatory exposure that we talked about, DOJ and FDA will be launching a criminal investigation against your company and requesting records and emails and documents relating to your operations and your food safety decisions, right? This is an exposure that we've never before faced. And it's, you know, and then when your product's linked to illness, now we got the civil element coming in too, right? So, we, you know, yesterday we were fine. You know, as long as moving forward, we're producing a safe product, we're cool. Now we got to look over our shoulders and be like, whoa, you know, what has been happening the last 10 years? And did we send out any product that was contaminated? And if FDA comes in our facility and we've got a resident strain of LM, that could be a problem. So if FDA finds it at retail, they will come into your facilities, they will begin mapping your facility from a microbiological standpoint, looking for those same strains in your facilities. But what the agency is also doing, got a little bit ahead of myself there, is that when it's coming into our facilities on routine inspections. It is the FDA's policy now when it comes into your facility to conduct that first inspection to do microbiological profiling within your facility, looking for Listeria monocytogenes, looking for Salmonella, looking for pathogens of concern. And not just, you know, swabbing drains, but looking for those in places where they're most likely to be found, and parts of equipment that are hard to disassemble, clean, or sanitize, and areas of the facility that are often neglected. It will be looking within our facilities for what it can find. And if it finds LM in our facility or Salmonella, it's going to do the same thing that it did when it finds it at retail. It's going to compare it against the PulseNet database. And if that LM that was cultured from your drain in your facility matched one or more illnesses over the course of the last few years, the agency will presume that your food products cause those illnesses and will expect you to issue what could potentially be an exceedingly broad recall. We're no longer, you know, what's done is no longer the rule. What's done is done could come back to potentially haunt us. And again, if there's human illness, DOJ will follow quickly behind with the initiation of a criminal investigation to determine whether there's any basis for criminal charges to be brought against the company or the company's individuals. So when we look at this new world in which we're living and these new risks that we now face, and they're real, FDA will be coming into your facility. And when they do, that's guaranteed. There's nothing we can do about that. They're coming. When they come, they're going to swap. So can we be held personally liable under those circumstances? And can the company be held liable under those circumstances? I'm just going to run through a couple examples here, talk about kind of what we're seeing. We're going to start with PCA. Everybody's very familiar with it, but I feel it's important to note, and then talk about the more recent cases and what's happening. And then we can start having a discussion about what do we do starting tomorrow to better protect ourselves and to make sure that we don't find ourselves as the next Blue Bell, the next Chipotle, the next Dole, potentially CRF or General Mills, right? So what can we do? What are the things that we can put in place today to protect ourselves from this exposure? So let's talk just a little bit about sort of the, the extreme case. The one that we're most familiar with, of course, is Peanut Corporation of America. PCA was, for a long period of time, about 4 years before people, we really saw the epi curves popping, had all sorts of issues. And this is also a good example, and it speaks to what I talked about earlier. There might be a long period of time that, contaminated product is being released, but we're just not catching it, right? Until, at some point it finally comes to light. So for the 4-year period, what was the company doing? Failing to report positive results in its product, retesting product that tested positive, see if they could get a negative and then ship it, denying to their customers the existence of any positive results. We've never had a positive. What are you talking about? We've got the best operations ever. We're like high on food safety. When in fact, they were having all sorts of problems. Creating false certificates of analysis that said the product was negative for the presence of salmonella when either it had not been tested or it had tested positive, and then shipping product with what, in the FDA's terms, was contaminated with filth, or put another way, shipped under insanitary, packaged and shipped under insanitary conditions. So 2008, as part of the broader outbreak, the first illness was identified, sort of the initial of this massive epi spike that we saw. November 2008 to April 2009, over 700 people got sick from almost all 50 states. 9 people were killed. There were almost 3,000 products, ultimately, that were affected by one company's food safety failures. 3,000 products. It's mind-boggling. February 11, 2011. Now note, this is almost 3 years, right, after the first people got sick. And the victims in that outbreak were still calling on Congress or FDA to initiate some type of criminal investigation. And it wasn't until 2012 that grand jury subpoenas were issued, 3 years after the outbreak. Well, what do we see happening recently? And now, if there's human illness, it's 3 weeks, right? So it gives us some insight as to some of the things that are happening. And then eventually the operations manager pleads guilty to criminal charges, and in exchange for giving some testimony that was helpful to DOJ, DOJ filed a 76-count indictment against the PCA officials, Mary Wilkerson, Michael Parnell, and Stuart Parnell. And what happens? We see that each of them receive prison time. Stuart getting the most at, I think it was 28 years. Okay, so let's not falsify documents. Let's not ship positive product. Let's stay away from all the things that PCA did. And all of us here are I'm certain, cool with that. Frankly, as a side note, let me just say, it's kind of sad that we're having this conversation, because as food safety professionals, as people in this business and in this industry, because of the profession we chose, generally means we're good people, right? We want to make safe food. We want to make the world a better place, and protect our families, our friends, and our neighbors who also happen to be our customers and our consumers, right? So, but that aside, what is FDA doing now to food companies generally, right? Well, it's resurrected this. This is the PARC doctrine. What is the PARC doctrine? Well, it's that new creative tool that the FDA reached in deep into its bag and said, aha, we have the solution. We know how to start making the outbreak stop. We know how to start making companies or motivating companies to do a better job. We're going to use the PARC doctrine. And the PARC doctrine lay dormant for almost more than 30 years. Hasn't really been used. And now, we see it showing up everywhere. This is the hammer that FDA is now using against food companies to threaten and compel enforcement. So the PARC doctrine stems from a 1975 Supreme Court case in which John Park, who was the CEO of Acme Grocery Stores, was charged by FDA and DOJ for some food safety failures. As the CEO of the company, Acme Grocery Stores, they had something like 1,000 stores up and down the East Coast. They had some major distribution centers. FDA came in to conduct an inspection, found some evidence of rodent activity in sanitary conditions, right, that could lead to adulteration in the facility, on the floor near a palleted product containing case product. FDA issues a 43 to the company. It's addressed to John Park as the CEO, as usually happens in these circumstances, even though he has a vice president of food safety, even though there's a facility manager, right, for the distribution center in question, the letter is issued to him as the CEO. He hands it off to his subordinates and says, deal with this. And he expects that they would. But a number of months later, FBI, we could start calling FDA FBI, but that may be a webinar that's reserved for a later date. FDA comes back into the facility and conducts a reinspection. And although it was improved, there was still evidence of rodent activity in the same area, i.e. insanitary conditions that could lead to the adulteration of product. And the agency decided to charge Mr. Park with a misdemeanor for holding product in insanitary conditions. Following, as you can imagine, the charges were contested. Following a jury trial, Mr. Park was convicted and found guilty of the misdemeanor because the CEO of the company didn't make sure that the insanitary conditions were corrected. The company and Mr. Park ran this all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court upheld the conviction, saying that yes, Mr. Park, as the CEO of the company, could be held liable. And basically, the standard that the Supreme Court adopted was this: if you are a food safety executive or manager, and I will say this could extend down to QA managers, all the way up to the CEO. If you're in the executive management or leadership of the company and you are aware of a condition that could lead to adulteration or somebody getting sick, keeping it simple, and you're in a position to correct or fix that condition and you fail to do so, then you could be held liable under a misdemeanor charge. Even if you don't know that you're shipping adulterated product, even if there's no evidence you shipped adulterated product, even if you don't know you're getting people sick, if you are, no knowledge or intent is required. You can be charged and convicted of a misdemeanor. And, every case of product we ship, theoretically, the government would argue, could support a single charge. And a single charge, misdemeanor charge, can carry, if convicted, a penalty of up to $250,000, or up to a year in prison. Very, very significant stuff. So this is the tool that the agency is now using to potentially bring criminal charges against food company managers and executives if their products are linked under the, in the environment we just talked about at retail or during a routine inspection to illnesses in the PulseNet database. So what is FDA doing to other companies? Well, it's gaining speed, is what I'll say. You remember the slide with the girl from Poltergeist? They're coming. It's gaining speed. The FDA has been slowly sort of dipping its toes into the water, seeing what it could get away with, what charges would stick, where it could get convictions or guilty pleas. Wright County Ag, Quality Ag, we saw a conviction there. There's some prison time, almost $7 million fine for the company. Each of the owners had to pull into their own pockets and pay the government $100,000. Jensen Farms, large cantaloupe outbreak associated with Listeria monocytogenes. Jensen Brothers didn't know they were shipping cantaloupe that was contaminated. They didn't know they were getting people sick. They wanted an organic product, so they didn't put chlorine in the water that they're using to wash the cantaloupe. Now, there's no intent, malice. They just wanted to sell a wholesome product, and yet they were charged criminally. And why? Because they were aware, remember the standard, they were aware of a condition, absence of chlorine in the water, that could lead to people getting sick, and maybe not, but it could. And in this case, it did. They were in a position to fix it, add chlorine. They didn't, so they're charged. Government reached back to Conagra Foods because of the outbreaks associated with peanut butter a number of years even further back, and said, yeah, we gotta do something about that as well, which resulted in about a $11 million negotiated settlement in the criminal charges. And then Bluebell, what happened at Bluebell? I see that we're getting close to the hour here. We're going to reserve some time for questions, and I see that we have a few. What I'd like to do is just kind of I think this information is important. We'll get it out. We'll have some time for questions. I may go all the way to 1 o'clock at that point in time. Feel free to hold them until then. Or if we don't get to your questions, just contact me separately following the webinar the next couple of days if you think of anything, and we can just chat as if it was our opportunity here. So what happened at Bluebell? Well, nothing. The company was producing ice cream, and every once in a while it would find some environmental positives, just like any other company. LM was in the environment. We found it in the drain. We found it on the loading dock. We found sporadically it was appearing. And Bluebell was doing what every other company did. We got LM in the drain. We re-clean, we re-sanitize, we retest, and then it's negative. Now we resume operations. And that's fine in the absence of illness. But FDA went out, or state health department went out and collected ice cream off at retail, just like we talked about, tested positive for LM. It matched an illness that occurred 5 years ago, one illness from 5 years ago. They said, uh-oh, we got a problem. So FDA came in the facility, did this microbiological profiling. They found 2 facilities, 2 strains that were linked to 10 illnesses over the past 5 years. So imagine all the ice cream Bluebell was shipping for 5 years. And slowly, intermittently, every so often, some ice cream got out with Listeria. A total of 10 people were sick in confirmed cases over that 5 years. And that shut down the company, went out of business, and now they're faced with an ongoing criminal investigation. They didn't know they were shipping contaminated product. They didn't know they were doing anything wrong. They didn't know people were getting sick, but yet they could be charged criminally. Chipotle, same deal. I mean, when we look at what happened with Chipotle and Chipotle, nobody really knows yet what made those people sick. We know it was E. coli, but there's a lot of uncertainty, right? So Chipotle, it wasn't trying to make people sick. It wasn't intentionally shipping product that it knew was contaminated. Doing what every other company does, right? But the difference is illnesses were linked to that brand, and a criminal investigation was initiated. What's really scary in the Chipotle example is, Chipotle's problems were late 2015, August to November, right? Yet the grand jury subpoena issued by DOJ requested all records from January 1st, 2013, in essence to the present, relating to food safety issues. All emails, all documents, all decisions, right, relating to food safety. And what is the government doing with that? Trolling through it, looking for something, right, that would support a charge under the Park Doctrine that we talked about. Was there a condition that could lead, hypothetically, to illness that somebody failed to fix? And I'm not sure who at DOJ is sitting on the top of the mountain making these determinations, right? But somebody's going to make that decision. And we'll see what the results are as we move forward. Same thing with the whole, sporadic environmental positives. They were doing what other companies were doing. Nobody was trying to make people sick or hurt them, but yet there's a criminal investigation that's been launched. And I suspect, again, we'll see the same thing with CRF and General Mills under the new human illness standard. And every other company, and there will be, I expect an increase in the number of outbreaks identified, cold cases solved, right, and recalls as FDA continues to march across the country, swabbing facilities, looking for pathogens that have caused illnesses in the past. All of my clients who have been inspected recently, are reporting anywhere between, 150 to 300 samples being taken as a routine matter. So what can we do ourselves to avoid becoming a victim of sort of this regulatory push, this regulatory aggression when it comes to, trying to solve cold cases and, make the food supply safer? We can, a couple things. Number one, we can play FDA for a day. The idea here is, and I think the important message is, FDA is, they're coming. And they are going to show up in our facilities, right? And we're going to have to deal with that. It's a fact. So what can we do today in advance in anticipation of that happening? We can play, and we need to play FDA for a day. We need to go in and conduct our own microbiological profiling in our facilities. Because we may be one of those companies that has been, maybe we don't even have an environmental control program, which is a problem. But maybe we have a program that, we think it's pretty good, but we, at the end of the day, we can't be certain that the FDA isn't going to find anything when it comes to our facilities. So let's put on the FDA hat. Let's play FDA for a day, and let's go out and take 150 swabs in our environment. Let's let's try to find what the FDA would find if they showed up in our facilities next week. And then let's use those results to determine whether A, we have a persistence problem, a resident problem, and if so, define it, contain it, and then destroy it. And what I do with my clients is, when we play FDA for a day, if as their lawyer, I direct them to do this. This is above and beyond your daily food safety programs, your written food safety programs. This is a study that's above and beyond that. And as a result, it's directed to be performed by a lawyer, and it's then performed with the lawyer's direction. We put together basically a plan that doesn't implicate any food products, doesn't create any food safety issues, depending on the results. Now we're looking at zones 3 and 4, sometimes 1 and 2, but it depends on the circumstances, how we can make sure that there's no product that's going to be implicated. And then we execute and take those swabs, get those results, and then we get a nice, clear picture of what we see. But we're doing it all under the veil of the attorney-client privilege. So this information will never be discoverable by plaintiff's lawyers or FDA or DOJ. It will be protected. So A, we want to see what we have, but we want to see what we have in a way that only we're the ones seeing it. And once we do that, we have those results, we may find out, hey, wow, we got nothing. And good to go. High fives, everybody. Nice work. Let's keep doing what we're doing. Good job. But we may find that we see some patterns. And we see that there is, a certain percentage of our samples are testing positive for Listeria. It could be in places that, could potentially, if we take off silo vision, could potentially, get into product. And okay, what are we going to do about that? Let's look for a way to, again, contain and destroy it, build a better mousetrap, refine our existing environmental control programs to contain contamination, eliminate it. Depending on the facility, depending on the product, we might want to bring in, some ozone. We may want to put in other technologies that can clean the environment 24/7. A lot of PCO technologies. Puridyne is a company that provides some of these solutions, and I'm happy to put you in touch with those folks if you want more information. But we can, eliminate whatever contamination might exist in our facilities, and then make sure that we're controlling it, so that when FDA does show up, 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years from now, we know exactly what they're going to find, which is nothing, because we've done the study necessary and put in the controls needed to ensure that it doesn't come back. And usually this follows up, one of these microbiological profiling studies follows up with some enhancements to our daily monitoring programs, so that we've built some good defenses. So if anything sneaks back in, we're gonna see it right away. And then we need to bulletproof our programs. Like I said, the days of finding Listeria in a drain, getting a positive, and then recleaning, resanitizing, retesting, and resuming are no longer enough. DOJ and FDA will expect to see us as a company doing a very robust root cause analysis and taking corrective actions. So if it's in our drain, we're going to need to explain in our documentation, the most likely source of it getting into the drain, and our actions that we took to ensure that we get it at the source and that it doesn't come back again. And one of the things that we can do is in our corrective action reports that we should be filling out following a positive in the environment is using, going through what we did in response, and we should, I help my clients sort of put together a decision tree or flow chart that helps get us to where we need to be as far as containing the issue and then resolving it. But then concluding, using language really borrowed from the Park Doctrine, concluding by saying, this is the broader study root cause analysis we performed. These were our findings, and this is why we conclude that positive in the environment does not create a broader food safety issue. Doesn't create a condition that could lead to adulteration. And if we use that language in our corrective action reports, it would be very difficult for DOJ to argue that there's any evidence that we were aware of a condition that could have lead to adulteration or make people sick, and we failed to do anything about it, right? But in the absence of that document, the agency can conclude whatever it wants. If you didn't write it down, you didn't do it. It didn't happen, right? So we need some documentation showing that we're operating consistent with those standards that, you know, DOJ would say were violated and support criminal charges. So we really need to refine our existing corrective actions to shield ourselves from criminal liability in the event that our products at any point in time in the future are associated with an illness, to show that internally we were doing what we needed to do to ensure that we were producing only the safest possible food. A couple parting thoughts. You know, we have, I think, a duty and a responsibility to do a better job knowing who our suppliers are. Now, we may have our ship under control, but, you know, a platoon is only going to be as fast as its slowest runner. And if our suppliers are having problems, our suppliers' problems are going to become our problems. So I'll typically ask the audience in events like this, you know, show of hands, how many people would buy a used car from a used car dealer over the phone? And I don't care if there's 200 people in the audience or there's 2,000. Not a single hand will raise, because we all know that would be stupid. You have to, first of all, you want to look at the car, make sure that you're getting what you're paying for, but you want to see the dealership. You want to see if, you know, it's a reputable dealership, if it's, you know, made the investments to kind of support, you know, the quality of what it's selling. You want to meet the dealer and look in his or her eye and make a determination whether they're trying to pull fast on you or they really believe in the quality and safety of their product. We have to go through that process before we know whether the purchase we're making is a good one or not. And if we wouldn't do it over the phone for a used car, why are we doing it over the phone for food ingredients that could come into our facility, contaminate our products, our environment, and impact our brand? Finally, we got to develop, we have to implement, and we have to maintain in all of our organizations a very robust food safety culture. And there's, you know, really 3 C's of food safety culture that I like to share. The first is compassion. You know, we have to be compassionate about food safety if we're going to build a good culture. And I think all of us are, because of the profession that we chose, because we want to protect our brand. But then we have to do something with that compassion. We can't just ignore it or sit on it or do nothing with it. We have to commit to use our compassion to direct it towards making our food safety. We have to commit to have better training, have better resources, better interventions, the technologies I talked about, commit to invest in those resources, right, to produce a safer product, and then finally communicate that commitment to our company, its management, all the way down to the line workers, so that everybody knows we're compassionate, we're committed, and they hear us talking about the importance of our food safety culture. A parting thought, this is the top deck of the Disney Wonder, Disney cruise ship. And sometimes when I give these talks, you know, I have some colleagues with some of the, and clients with some of the, you know, larger U.S. food companies saying, Sean, you know, I hear you. That's great, but, you know, I think your message is really mostly geared towards the medium to small companies. And, you know, we're usually change their minds after we hear this presentation, but, you know, we're one of the most sophisticated companies. We have the best food safety minds money can buy. We have the best facilities that money can buy. You know, we're 5 steps ahead of the rest of the industry when it comes to this stuff. We know what we're doing. We're the best of the best. And I just remind them of that slide where we asked, what is your risk? Is it high or is it low? Where do you fall on that spectrum? For all those companies that said it was low, I think your risk might even be higher than everyone else, because that shows us and tells us that there's a level of complacency, you know, that we're satisfied with where we are. And I don't think anybody at any point in time in this industry, and I never am, I push myself pretty hard, can be satisfied with where we currently are. You know, Costa Concordia, 38 killed off the coast of Italy, you know, a tragic event. And here's another. And maybe this is the last note I'll take, which is, or I'll make, you know, this picture of the Titanic. You know, remember, when we go about our jobs, we have an awesome responsibility to keep our customers safe. When we look at that image and you see each of those lit portholes, just remind yourself that each one of those is a customer. It's our job to keep them safe. And if we can do that, I can proudly stand up in front of the media, the American consumer, a jury, a judge, or even DOJ, and say that I'm proudly helping the hardworking people like each one of you who feed our families. So with that, looks like we have a number of questions, but we're right up against the deadline. So we're going to all respond to those who have submitted questions directly. And if you have any questions moving forward, just reach out to me. My email is there, stevens@foodindustrycouncil.com, or give me a call. We'll just treat it as an extension of the seminar. I'd be happy to answer whatever questions that you have and have a food safety discussion. I want to thank everybody again for participating in today's event. I hope that the information I provided to you is valuable, and we'll continue to provide updates on recent developments and new statuses in the law, and we invite you to attend the next free webinar that we host. Thanks again for attending, and I appreciate your participation.